Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks here, as always, with Cara Braeutigam from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. We've got two special guests with us today. Mr. Jeff Kirkman, I'm going to let him introduce himself in a second, as well as Mike Harrison from Contemporary Resorts and Residences. And we might have someone else join us in a few minutes if they can get their video camera working. We'll see how that works out. But really excited to be with you here today, talking about developing an RV park, some of the tips and tricks that these gentlemen have learned over the course of their careers. And then remember, if you want to join in the chat, if you're watching us on a Facebook page, you can put that in the comments. We can bring you on here. My dog's joining into the background. She's already got stuff to say. And then, of course, we're on a podcast as well on Google, Spotify, all those kinds of places, iTunes. So if you want to catch us later, you can. So, gentlemen, do you want to introduce yourself? Jeff, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jeff Kirkman. I'm in Squamish, BC. I had an RV park for 13 years here in this town. We just recently sold it. I've been in the civil construction industry my whole adult life, and that's sort of how I got into that. Wanted to have a campground, and we built it from scratch. Cleared the trees, sewer and water in, everything, electrical. So now I just consult a little bit in the industry and just love the industry. That's why I stay in it. I think it's one of the best ones that I could ever have found.
Well, I know there's a lot of consulting that is necessary in this industry, especially with the expansions of the last really 4 or 5 years. But it's been accelerated because of COVID. So super excited to contribute. Mike from Contemporary.
Sure. My name is Mike Harrison from CRR. I'm the Vice President of Operations. I have a primarily hospitality background in the hotel and restaurant business for 30 years, and then just dove into the RV business head first. Our company has multiple business entities, including RV storage facilities, manufactured home neighborhoods, and then we're developing several luxury upscale resorts. And similar to Jeff, I love the hospitality business, but the RV resort business has allowed me to tickle my personal outdoor passion. So, one of my favorite things is hopping in the golf cart and riding around while I talk to the managers. That way I can check out the park and, talk to guests at the same time.
So here's my question. Why do we not have themed RV resorts yet? So I traveled the country when I was starting Insider Perks, right? And I went to all these unique hotels that were themed. There's this super cool hotel in Overland Park, Kansas. No idea why it's in that town of all places. But it's like a romantic bed and breakfast or whatever that has 12 different themed rooms, like Camelot and like a pirate ship mounted in the middle of it. How come we don't have RV resorts that are themed like this? Like, I know we have yogis and some things like that, but I feel like there's a lot of room for some ingenuity here.
I think it's coming. Go ahead, Cara.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, Mike. I think it's coming. I think you're going to start to see some pretty diversified stuff, especially as we see, some of the hotel businesses and things like that starting to transition over into RV parks and resorts. I think there's definitely appetite from consumers for that unique experience style camping. So, yeah, I think it's coming. I think it's early days.
I think you'll start to see some more. That's what you mentioned, the yogis, and there's a lot of those in the U.S., but they're very few and far between here in Canada. Even the KOAs, they're not as many. But I think you'll start to see more change where people start to sort of solidify what they want to bring, and those parks sort of actually. They have a theme. They're not, quite what the hotels that you're mentioning, but they do. It gives a standard of quality. Like KOA's always had that, and you'll see that with the other theme parks too. So I think you'll start to see that.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's going to go so much towards thematic as more experiential. As you see some of the, under canvas or the auto camp, much more heavily glamping and outdoor experiential. I think is clearly where the industry is heading, and that's what people want. And I think part of part of it is if you look at any RV resorts demographics, it's so diversified now. We're, historically, I think it was 55 plus. And now, I was looking at our analytics page the other day, Brian, and literally, I think every segment is 10%.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting times. I'm looking forward to what happens in this industry. I'll tell you, like 10, 20, 30 years, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's an interesting time for this industry for sure. So specific to developing a park, I'm interested to hear, I got a couple of questions last week actually from a group that is looking to do just that. They've purchased 3 properties in Alberta and they're bare land and are kind of diving into the permitting process and a couple of, I think one of the properties needs to be rezoned and things like that. I don't know if maybe Jeff, this is a good question for you in your civil background, but what is that hurdle like to that first set of hurdles like to jump and can you give us any?
It's frustrating and can be long, but the biggest tip is just stick with it. Like you have to grind it out. Sometimes dealing in municipalities are really helpful. My town was, but I had more provincial issues that I had to deal with, which really took a long time. But stick with it and get it engineered. Spend the money in the beginning. Spend the money on the engineering and the drawings, and get it done right, because it just comes back to haunt you later. If you try to cut corners in the very beginning, those corners are always, you're tripping over them for the rest of the job. You have to start right. It's just like building a house on a level foundation, and then just keep going up from there. So that's my biggest advice. Stick with it, and then do the early work and the paperwork and the engineering early.
It's funny you say that, Jeff, because we have now 5 resorts in development, but also multiple, RV storage facilities, etc. But, I came into it after the first 2 were one was already built, and then the other 2 were in development. Then we have 3 more. That's the discussion I've had with our general contractor, is also our partner. But you can tell the level that we paid for our architect, the quality goes up significantly, the response goes up significantly. And, the second park that's currently in development, like I'm having to check, I found a site count error. We had 2 site 151s. Oh, and then we had a drainage error. So we had the wrong sites that were different than the pro forma. The site count was wrong. Versus the one that we're using for our one in Coachella, it's the renderings are done in a day, right? It's questions. It's just so much. Yeah. Of course you're paying, $50 or $100 more an hour, but your time that you're spending on the back end is significantly earned.
And I would also recommend, sorry, I'll just, before you step in, if you get an engineering company and they haven't done RV parks or campgrounds before, then you'll want to team up with either a consultant or an architect, someone that has, because otherwise you'll end up getting a parking lot or a square. Even the engineering company we used in the beginning, it was like, that's not going to work. We're going to have to soften that up. So just get someone that knows what they're looking for.
One of the most fascinating things that I've learned, and sorry, Cara, I didn't mean to.
No, please, it's all good.
Is that time, like everybody says time is money, right? But it couldn't be more true as we learn more things about this industry. I mean, I came into it, 10 plus years ago from a marketing aspect, and I knew that time was money and stuff like that. But as I learn more about development and all the intricacies and the amenities and the contractors, it's across the spectrum. I mean, we had a KOA owner, I remember, in Austin, Texas, who 6 years it took him to get the permits to open his park. And I was reading this morning, I think it was in Woodalls, there was a guy who spent 5 years and finally got his approval for a 32-site campground, which is great. It's amazing that you're able to fulfill your dream, but I wonder how much of that could have been expedited or not. Obviously, it's very location dependent, but
definitely, if you have experts on the front end. Oh, I'm sorry, Cara, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was just going to say the same thing. I think hiring those experts and working with those teams actually helps with those processes. And it's also, frankly, a great benefit often of membership in your association, because they can connect you either with those professionals or directly with those county offices that need to help you get those permits and stuff through. But I do find that there's a limit or a lack of representation for consultants like Jeff is talking about, and professionals specific to this industry who have that really focused experience on RV parks and campgrounds. I don't know, obviously, I'm assuming that it's much better and there's better representation for that in the States, but there's definitely a lack of it here. So that association membership does help so that we can, connect campground owners with.
There are some people down here in the States, like Joe Moore's one in Texas. Horizon Group is a bigger company that's got a whole breadth of advice. So there's a couple other ones, but it's still there's a lack of that resource down here too. I think, especially permitting and government regulations, because that's you have to take such a deep dive into that and get to know your local laws and all regulations and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Hire Jeff Kirkman. Hire Jeff Kirkman.
And it's a big difference because I've done a lot of stuff in the States. Like Joe Moore's a very good friend of mine, but just the laws, everything is so different.
So different.
So we have found a local specialist in all the markets that we've been in. Because we just don't want the perception that corporate America is coming into the local, and they just have a relationship, with the folks that absolutely, the authorize the permitting or the special laws, and same thing with connecting us with legal folks. So that's something that we've really found is finding a local expert who's got those pre-existing relationships, and that's helped us quite a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine, definitely.
So to the people who let's make this kind of an education piece, right? Because this definitely will have, like, we see some people watching us on Facebook Live. A lot of our views come afterwards, and it's going to have legs for a long time, I feel like, on our website and other places like that. So let's start this from a developing standpoint. We've talked about permitting briefly. What does it take for the people who are interested in doing this or just getting started or expanding? What does it take to get from I want to build an RV park to first shovel in the ground?
And I know a year to 18 months and a little bit of cash. You need a little cash to carry you through to get those drawings done, to get that engineering done. So you need a little startup cash to get started, for sure. And realistically, we're probably almost $100,000 into it before we put the first shovel in the ground. But then, like I said, we put all the money up front to get it going, and then once we started, then it was no looking back.
Now that's $100,000 after the land purchase, right? Or included?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that was after.
Yeah.
But if you can find a $100,000 land purchase here, you let me know, and I'll.
Right?
Yeah, I'd get in on that too. Yeah, hook me up.
It's a 5-acre park.
Yeah.
And another thing that I didn't mention too is you need to join your associations, the Canadian Association, whatever the provincial or the national one. Get involved, because that is a huge resource, and I've been involved in them since before we started building the park. We started. Yeah.
I think even just the ability to network with other operators is, even if you're not even, utilizing that, the association relationship with your municipality or whatever, the ability to connect with other operators and not just near you, but feedback from folks, in a broad range of demographics and regions is really, really, really valuable. I can't express it enough. You see in all these Facebook groups and things like that, folks are asking questions specific to this stuff all the time. Campground owners are incredibly supportive of each other. It's one of the things I love most about this industry is they certainly don't treat each other like competitors the way most industries do.
That's true. Coming from the hotel business, everything's a secret, proprietary, specialized. And here people are much more open, owners as well as guests. It's a much more friendly, spiritual, kind of industry. But I would say,
I totally agree.
But I would say do your research. It's okay to have money. It's okay to find a piece of land, but every place is different. Not just legal and municipality, code and laws and all that, but what you may do in one locale may be completely different and fail utterly at another one. You got to understand what your market is, what amenity set you want to have, what kind of sites you want to build, and the civil engineering, as Jeff had mentioned, understanding kind of what your local nature, climate conditions are like. I mean, all of that is super important so that you're not fixing it kind of on the back end after you open, which unfortunately, we learned as we went a little bit, and made some adaptations, as we went forward.
Sometimes that's the best way to learn, is mess things up a little bit, for sure.
Yeah, we built our park in 3 phases, and each phase was a little different. And you learn from that one, and everything was just a little different as we got to the end.
Well, see, and that's the benefit, though, that we're talking about, right? Like, bring in the experts that can help you with whether it's marketing or development or construction or feasibility studies or financing or local lobbying or whatever you need to do, right? Because those people have done it before, and so you can do it without them. You can do all the research, but you're going to go through those stumbling blocks that other people have already gone through. So don't be afraid to ask for that advice, even if it's not hiring a consultant, because maybe you don't have the budget for that because of what you're building or where you're coming from or what your background is. But get in a Facebook group and talk to the other owners. And, if you want to become a KOA, like, take all their expertise, or again, joining your association. But there's tons and tons of resources out there. There's no need to struggle on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I did when I started was we had one of the major influencers stay at our resort. So I had reached out back to them after they stayed, and we had 3 separate calls. He spent an hour with me each time. And I kind of picked their brain about, what is the most important thing to a customer right now? Is it the clubhouse? And, because I don't even want to tell you how much we spent on our clubhouse. But we didn't really need to, right? And we've adjusted our spend, for what matters. And then we compared that, to the RVIC's, annual report. And what he's saying in the RVIC annual report basically lined up, right? And so we adjusted our spending, to hit those top, amenity requests, those top, items that were important to the guest. So we kind of just made sure that we check those boxes off. And to your point, I didn't spend any money on consultants, but I did spend time, talking to folks.
Sure. Well, and again, that speaks to another great benefit of membership with your association is the access to that kind of data. That stuff is included with your membership, and you can really utilize that to make some significant business decisions, for sure.
Here's a question for you, gentlemen. Like, obviously, you're talking about the RVIC report. KOA does their North American Camping Report. There's lots of data out there that you can study as far as just like what you're saying, what guests want. But how do you balance that, or is there not a need to balance that with something like, you look at Apple, right? When they invented the iPhone, nobody knew they wanted an iPhone with a touchscreen and an app store and all that kind of stuff, right? Is there a market for that where certain RV parks or destinations or resorts are inventing things that are going
100%.
to might be wildly successful? The consumer doesn't know they want yet.
So I think if you look at AutoCamp, right, their model is really kind of bringing like a 5-star experience where they have a clubhouse with an upscale restaurant with the Airstreams, right? Our vision statement for CRR is evolving the industry to the modern world. Because when we came into this space, we felt, with all respect to all of our fellow RV park owners and managers, that the industry is 10, 15 years behind the hotel business, just in terms of sophistication and delivery. And so we're trying to do things that are innovative for the RV world. So for example, we saw a clear need, if you look at your guests, at least 35-40% of them have a pet of some kind. Most of them have a dog. And if you go to any RV resort, I mean, it's a little dog run, if they even have a dog run, that's like, 10 by 10. So we said, well, what if we built a 7,000 square foot dog park? Would that be something that would appeal towards guests, and that we put that in all of our resorts? We call it Canine Corner, and now you can pay for a special Canine Corner site that's upgraded, that has a doggy goodie bag, and those kinds of things. And do we know if that's going to be the next coming of every RV resort in the world? Not yet, but we wanted to try something different. To your point, Brian, of it's not Grandma and Sally Joe's RV park from 25 years ago anymore, and it can't be as it becomes more and more experiential.
Yeah, well, and as your demographics are shifting, like you mentioned earlier, Mike, I think your market wants different things because they just have different interests. They have different expectations of what their vacation or their trip is going to look like. And so, staying on top of that stuff and paying attention to it is incredibly valuable, especially as you're building the park. I mean, I think certainly as your park ages, it's valuable to address that stuff too. But if you're in the scenario where you're just starting out, you have kind of this massive opportunity to be really unique and
Creative.
yeah, it's, I mean, it would be so exciting. I mean, yeah, I would love that.
So we have Angela on now. Angela works for me. She's my project
Hi,
manager
Ange.
for Insider Perks. We
Hey.
do marketing for actually Mike's Parks, which is part of the reason that that Angela is on here. And so later in our conversation, Mike, is we're going to progress through this development, right? And now we've talked about getting to the shovel ground, and we're going to talk about other things. But when we get to the marketing aspect, I want Angela to talk a little bit about what she's done for you guys from a ground up perspective. So, and just kind of some of those things you might want to consider from that aspect. But otherwise, feel free to jump in anytime you want, Angela.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
So if
Yeah,
we're on,
thank you.
we've got to the shovel part now. What are some of the things that people who are interested, again, sticking with our theme, developing a park, researching all those kinds of things, you've got to the shovel in the ground. Now, what are you instructing the contractors to do? What are you making sure can't be overlooked?
I'll say, oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Jeff.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I didn't personally build a park, but we did do some expansion projects and ad sites and things like that. So maybe similar experience there. So I would say and again, I also didn't hire a contractor. We kind of did all of our stuff in-house with our own staff and had actually my ex-husband, who had tons of construction experience and those things, was really valuable. But I would say it was surprising to me the amount of work that needed to go in underground before anything, visible or valuable was happening there. So I think, again, same as before, the experts and relying on folks who really know the codes, electrical codes, expectations for how your sewer and water systems specifically need to work, specifically around things like environmental regulatory expectations and stuff like that in your municipality. Those things are really big for right after shovels go in the ground.
I would say inspections. If you're not doing it yourself, and I did all mine myself, then you need to have someone. And again, that's either not usually a consultant, but usually your engineer needs to show up and start doing inspections and just make it very clear. For me, as a contractor, working as a contractor before, you don't always want to hire the cheapest, lowest bid. I know money's hard and it's hard to get, but you do actually get what you pay for. So you need to really run down and see what contractors you're hiring and what, if they've done any campground experience. And it just really needs to be clear. Like you have to do it right. You can't cut the corners, because if you cut the corners, it'll trip you up later on, especially sewer and water. To go back into a road once you're open, and it never happens in the winter when you're closed. It only happens in July long weekend, August long weekend. You bring in an excavator and take up the road, and that's not a good experience for anybody. So just take your time and do it right. Spend the money and do it right.
And I would say two other things to look at. One is decide ahead of time how you want to build your internet infrastructure, internet and TV, because with the way technology is evolving right now, you could spend $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $800,000 depending on how big your park is in wiring and cable and conduit. If you go to a traditional mesh network system, but some of these satellite systems now, you can save significant hundreds of thousands of dollars by pulling in fiber and using microwave towers, for example. And then the second thing, especially in today's day and age, is check your budget every month, because we are looking at electric per site in terms of conduit installation. If you go back a year and a half, it's $350 a site. Now it's like $850 a site and going up, right? With the way everything is today, and materials and shortages and make sure the budget that you drafted a year ago is the same as it is today. Otherwise, it's going to escalate pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great points.
I'd like to have unlimited money to just build a park, so I can just be as creative as possible. I remember reading, I don't know.
Wouldn't.
No, just to be like creative, right? To just do whatever you want to do and like blow people away with like the Dallas when they were building the Cowboys Stadium down there, right? They spent like $1 billion+. There's better stadiums than that now. But I remember, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago when we were first hearing about the scaling up of solar, and they were really starting to innovate those solar panels, and the roofs were coming out and stuff like that. There was a vendor, I can't remember where I saw them, but they were building streets in a city in Idaho, I think, that were totally, like, the panels on the, instead of asphalt, the whole street was a solar panel in energy. And then on the side, there was a like, all the way running down the road, there was a I don't know, like a path or a pit or whatever, aqueduct or venting or whatever you call it. I don't know. I'm not a road guy. But you could lift it up and you could they ran all the cables through there, and so that they could go in, and without busting up the
service
asphalt,
everything.
they could change out the cables or add new ones or modify or stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's feasible in an RV park today, or may never be, but it would be interesting to just think outside the box with funds like that.
The complex thing about that dynamic, Brian, is you can spend $1 billion on your campground now, but then 5 years from now, there's going to be fancy new things to re-add. And
but that's everything, right? I mean, that's Dallas Cowboys Stadium. It's outdated now, and they spent $1 billion on it. So
look at the evolution of the campground washrooms in the last 15 years, right? Cinder block building. Nobody ever wanted to go in them. It was a nightmare. And now, even ours, when we built ours 13, 14 years ago, it was tile floors, tile heated floors, up the size of the building. Like, and now they're just beautiful. Like, you look at some of them online on the Facebook posts, and it's like, wow, they went crazy with the bathrooms, and it pays. People love that.
Last year we had an RV park in Alberta won Canada's best bathroom, an RV park. So they're definitely stepping up their game around here for sure.
Yeah, we had, I mean, and it's just like, when you were a kid, right? My mom would drive 20 miles out of the way to go to the gas station she knew had the super clean bathroom, right? Yeah. It's the same thing with hotels or RV parks or anywhere you're going. There's a demand for that. And I remember we had a KOA down near Austin, I mentioned near Austin, same guy, but super small campground just right on the Colorado River. I think they had 40 or 50 sites. They don't own it anymore. So they had this huge, massive, luxury Texas-style bathroom that was just marble inside. And man, people would talk about that and share it on social media, and it drew a ton of attention for that. So
yeah, I think that's my point. Is just like, you could spend all the money, but sometimes those standby, really valuable things are the basics, right? Really investing money in those basics is incredibly valuable, I think.
That's fair. Okay. And I don't know. I mean, I'm a marketer. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Man, build your solar roads. Can't wait to see it.
I'm just creating a conversation here. We're just talking about it. I mean, solar is not going to evolve. Like, a solar is going to last you 30, 40, 50 years. And the point is if you have that trench,
totally
evolve, because we were talking about cable and satellite and wires and come along. So
it's doing things in those unique or smart ways to make them more easily serviced and stuff. That stuff makes total sense to me.
To Mike's point too, with reevaluating your budget consistently and stuff like that too, I think prioritizing, like, obviously there are must-do things that you just, like, there's no way around it. If you want to open, you have to do it, and you have to do it at certain stages of development too. And so I think making sure you have your priority list, and then you have your wish list, and how that fits in, and like what you could put into, I'd really like to have that when we open, but maybe that needs to be phase 2 or phase 3. And making sure too, like, extravagant amenities are great, but like Cara was saying, the basics and making them really nice also, you're going to see a huge return on those. And you have to make sure that you can add anything that you want, but you have to make sure that people are still going to be willing to pay for that to make that investment worth it too. So, solar, whatever, at a campground is great and cool, and a lot of people will pay for that, but a lot of people won't. And so factoring that into what you have to charge for your site, being conscious of that, I think, is important.
Yeah, again,
to be fair, if he has $1 billion to build the campground, he doesn't care if people pay the rate. Come stay for free.
This is true.
New world of a limited bank budget, right? You're not going to justify that. But it's a cool idea.
Right.
All right. So we talked about what you're going to watch over with the contractors and the engineers and things like that. At what point are there stages throughout the breaking ground to opening where you periodically reevaluate, where you take a higher level view and say, oh no, stop, we need to readjust this and do it differently? Is there stages, is there phases, or is it just kind of boots on the ground, we're just going to wait then till open?
I think it's every week.
Yeah, you have to consciously schedule repetitive time, because it's easy to just dive in and go tunnel vision and lose that aerial view, right? I think scheduling that and prioritizing it probably would be one of the most valuable things you could do to undertake a project like this, for sure. It would be consistently required.
Repetitive. I think you have to be careful though too, because anytime you change something, especially if it's design built, then you've got to get, you know, new drawings, you got to get re-permitted. It slows it down. And you know, and we've had those discussions in multiple of our parks, because if we miss our window by 2 months, then that's worth $500,000 in revenue.
You bet.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if we miss our season window. And so, yes, you want to continue to evaluate, and you need to understand state of the union where you are and balance, you know, man, do I have to make that change, or can I come back and do it? Yeah. Or, you know, what, you know, but yeah, if you put your blinders on and, you know, press go and just wait till it opens, you know, that's a problem too. So it's got to be finding that right mix, you know, understanding kind of where you're at, and, you know, do you want to adjust on the fly? Can you adjust on the fly? How much is it going to cost now versus later, et cetera?
Yeah, sticking to the plan is important. It's like dropping a rock in the pond. That ripple, it'll go all the way down. And perfect example for us is we ended up wanting to save a tree where the sewer line was scheduled to go, and just a few weeks in delays in re-engineering that line, and then water table was up, and we didn't get it in that year. We had to wait till the fall. It was just that much, and it's just that ripple just continues on. That was a $25,000 tree that we could have replaced easily. It wasn't that big, but it's just, we'll just go around it.
Right.
It was a fight. It wasn't my decision. I just lost the decision.
But is that a delay from a permitting governmental regulation process, or is that
No, but when you start changing, throwing angles into a sewer line, then you need to get it re-engineered, and then because you've changed the grade now, so then that changes it all the way down to the other end of the park. So
that's what I'm saying. You got to be careful. You have drawings. If you have to have something redrawn, I mean, you just add 2-3 months sometimes, because you got to have it drawn, and sometimes re-permitted, re-inspect. I mean, so it just messes it up. So that goes back to Jeff's point in the beginning. Make sure we start right. You know, and you can't predict everything, right? Yep. But you know, hopefully you've got enough that you're doing the right thing, so you don't have to make changes.
And one thing we didn't mention is when that first shovel goes in the ground, that's when you come in, Brian. That's when marketing starts. You want to start your marketing early and get people knowing about your park. The last thing, I mean, when you first opened that door, and we were really delayed with our park, we didn't actually get it open until November. Well, our final power was hooked up. It was like mid-November, long weekend actually for Remembrance Day, and it's a pretty lonely feeling when you're actually open and there's no customers coming in. Like it's really weird. I remember the first one coming in. It was like 5 days later, but it was a weird, eerie feeling. You've done it, spent all this money, and they're not coming. But yeah.
Let's dive into that for a second. Angela and Mike, you guys have been working together for, since what, January now or something like that? Walk us through some of that process. What's it involved from both of your perspectives?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I think marketing to me is probably one of the single most important things you can do at any of these parks. You know, what I found, and we've had this discussion before, is there's not an Expedia.com for the RV resort world. There's not, you know, Marriott.com. So there's not one place that everybody goes. There's 25 of them. And so I remember when I first started it at our, you know, home property, they had, you know, previous company and previous, you know, management had said, hey, we ran out of our budget. And so they turned off Google ads and Facebook ads. And so I said, turn them back on. And literally the next day we saw our views triple. And so we have been under that philosophy ever since day one, you know, is market, and specifically with Google ads. And then so we kind of reassessed who we were using, and then made the change to go with RV, you know, specialists inside of Perks to help us, you know, kind of create and understand the industry. But for us, we're constantly evolving, trying to find the balance of revenue management and top line marketing and analytics with, not overcomplicating it, but trying to challenge the status quo of, hey, here's how everything's always been done. And I think a great example is Angela, is it okay if I make fun of Brian for a second? Okay.
Always.
Okay. But perfect example, and this has happened twice. Once where I had said something to Brian about, hey, what if we went to like a different city? I think it was RV parks near Sedona. No, that's outside the stay within your zone. You don't have that much bit. And then sure enough, it's now our number one clicked keyword. But then on the flip side, I had said something, and Brian's like, no, and sure enough, Brian was right. But it's approaching the business, I think, a little bit differently, with a hospitality spin, I think, that helps.
And it's ever evolving too. Like, we have to listen to each other. I'm just because
Right.
I've been in the RV industry for 10 plus years doesn't mean I know everything. I don't. And so hearing from somebody who comes like you are from outside the industry and says like, well, let's try this. And my initial thing is, well, that hasn't really worked for the last 10 years. That doesn't mean it's not going to work now or for you. So.
Yep. What about you, Angela? What have you found?
I think it's been a really neat experience to work with you guys, and really, because you're developing so many different parks that have different landscapes, different regions of the country, and that sort of thing. It's been really interesting to kind of build what your overall like corporate brand looks like and how that is implemented across each property, maintaining the continuity across the CRR brand, but also maintaining that individualism of each park. And it's been really cool to collaborate on that and kind of envision what that looks like, and design different logos and websites and things like that. It's been really cool experience.
Yeah, I bet.
I always find sometimes that, like for us, we had a specific target for the RV park, and they're all big size for big rigs, and we weren't expecting that many families. But over the years, once they find you, I find that the market changes and shifts, and we ended up focusing way more on families than we ever thought we would. Like, we were changing the playgrounds and doing stuff because the industry is growing so fast and changing. Like, the families, when I was a kid, everybody tented. There was no RVs. We tented and went camping in the rain. And there's just seems to be exploding, and a lot more RVs showing up with 5 kids jumping out the back and wanting things to do. So I always find that the market, you think you're going in one direction, but it kind of always wants to slip. And that's why Mike is right. You kind of have to hit everywhere. You can't just sort of stick with what you think you know. You have to go everywhere and be everywhere, and then see where it takes you. That's what I find.
That's another huge benefit to kind of chatting with other operators or hiring, a consultant or whatever to bring this fresh new perspective, because, it's easy to get or feel like you have a good grasp of what's happening, and that new pair of eyes can be so valuable for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think,
go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Brian. Well, I was going to say, I think pivoting, is important. I think, once what we use the same philosophy in the hotel business. One size does not fit all. Just because something works over here at this park does not mean it's going to work over here in this park. And, we have 2 completely different, destinations, where patterns are different. And one's a much more seasonal, long-term type, park, where the other one's much more transient and weekend driven. And the customer and the marketing demand, different. And some of the solutions are still going to be the same. It's still going to be basic, and you still got to tie your shoes, the same way for every resort. But other ones are going to take different approaches. And I think that, to Brian's point, collaboration, is where it's important. Understanding the balance of that.
Mm-hmm. And pivot, I know it's an overused word lately, but it is important. You have to be quick on your feet. Like, just going back to last year with this pandemic, and a lot of parks did really well. Everybody wanted to get out of the city and go camping, but a lot didn't. And it was because they've always focused on their marketing. This is the way we've done it. They had tunnel vision, and we didn't get Americans coming across the border, and we didn't get Albertans coming into BC. So if you're on that east part of the province, but there's no excuse for that this year. I mean, if you weren't fast enough last year to pick up on that, then that's fine. But But if you turn around and have a bad year this year, then that's on you, because you didn't look at where you were and what happened and where do we go from here. And that's, again, it's marketing everywhere, not just year one. And you'd be surprised. Don't just keep doing the same thing. Like you said, you went to that place, Brian told you not to, and look at it. That's your best one. So it's hard to get out of the tunnel vision, but you have to be able to step back.
Well, it's a trap that everybody falls into, right?
Oh, yeah. It's very human.
All business owners, it's like, I remember reading a story about Coca-Cola and their board of directors who really didn't push hard into Facebook until 2010 or later, because their board was stuck on, TV commercials and the polar bears and all that kind of stuff has worked for us since 1970 or 80, and people are still
Why fix it?
So why should we change, right?
Yeah.
It's a mindset that is really hard for a lot of people to break out of. But Mike's right, everywhere you can. And Jeff's right too, like these demographics are consistently shifting and changing, and you need to do your market research and learn and adapt and shift and pivot and all those kinds of things. But there are some basics too that you need to make sure you're doing, and Google Ads is one of them, right?
Yep.
We've seen for the last so many years, I mean, pre-COVID, right? I would go to all the state conferences in the United States and the national conferences in KOA and Ontario show and et cetera, et cetera. And there were so many classes on millennials. This is changing the demographic. What do you need to do to market to millennials? On and on and on. And none of these people were even running Google Ads. And so it just kind of fascinated me, not that they were wrong to focus on millennials, because they need to learn about that demographic and adjust and shift. But those millennials and the older people and the kids with and the families with kids and all this, they're still doing the same thing on Google that they have for the last 20 years. Campground near Phoenix, RV park near Phoenix, cabin rentals near Phoenix. And so you need to get the basics down before you start. Yes, you need to pay attention to them, but before you start frantically saying, I need to adjust everything to target millennials, think about what you can do that's the same across everybody.
Right. That's the tie your shoes part, right? Like we still got to get up in the morning and tie our shoes. And sometimes people forget, like I just never forget that story, and I showed ownership, and that's been part of it, is educating ownership, kind of as they're very flexible and nimble and understanding, but the analytics, data doesn't lie, right? It can tell a story and you can interpret a story from it, but the data, is really what helps drive our business to understand, where you want to spend your money, where the right money is. And so, we got another $750,000 approved in glamping options. And some of the stuff, our 60-plus-year-old owner is now an expert, light term, in Instagram, right? And understanding Instagrammable moments and Instagrammable marketing, but that's what it has to be, that experiential. You want people taking a picture of your stuff and posting it up on social media, and now he understands that. And when you can support it with the back end data, that's when you can get, to spend more money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, start with the fundamentals, continue to do your research, and then adapt and add and change as you move forward, but always make sure you're covering those basic fundamentals, because those aren't going to change. Just like the stock market, chasing the stocks that are up 20% for the day and trying to get in at the top. Well, that's not the best strategy. You have to do the fundamentals and research those first, and then decide to pivot and adapt. So.
I think it's important too, not just doing the fundamentals, but doing them and doing them consistently. A lot of the fundamentals require you to continue checking in on them. Like, you can't just say, okay, I did Google Ads, I don't have to worry about it anymore, set it and forget it. Or even your social media, like, okay, well, I set up my Facebook page, so that's it. I don't need to do anything else. It exists. And same with your website too. Just, if you've added new things, make sure your pictures are up to date. Make sure your amenity lists are up to date. Just all of those little things can make such a huge impact on, your bookings and people talking and sharing those Instagrammable moments with their friends. And, they'll talk about it for years if you do it right.
Awesome.
So what are the key factors, Angela, that you would recommend to a developing park that they need to do for marketing? And you can go into timelines if you want, but just kind of like, here's what you must have before you open.
I think that before you can really start anything else from a marketing branding standpoint is you need to have your name, and then you need to design a logo. And that will really help to, once you have that logo in place, then you have an idea of colors and you have fonts and with your logo, you're kind of describing the initial experience that guests are going to have at your property before they've even seen a picture or anything else. So I think name and logo are key. And then from there, you want to make sure that you go and you create your social media accounts, you claim your Google listing, and you get working on a website. So you can get your name out there. People, know that you exist. You start showing up in searches and that sort of thing. Even if it's a simple website, before you really have any information, a simple contact us. This is who we are. This is what we hope to bring. And, target is spring of 2022 or whatever it is, just to give them a little something. And then, you can kind of share that development journey with people too, through your social media channels. And then they feel like they've kind of been on it with you, like, oh, I remember when this was just dirt and you had no bathhouse, and now look we're camping here and we're enjoying these beautiful amenities. And I think, everybody wants a good story. So I would say that those are some of the super key pieces. Google ads are absolutely important, call tracking and those things, but those are things that you want to start closer to opening, and once you've opened and you've started to generate some revenue and things like that. But there's a lot of cheap and relatively free things that you can do just with your social media accounts and claiming listings and stuff like that, before you really get into the meat of it all.
And I think, going back to your point, you shouldn't overlook the importance of choosing a name. I saw a post up on the Arvik Campfires Facebook page. Somebody had asked that question also, and we just went through this with our property down in Hardyville, about what's the right name to choose. And it's everything goes back to the online world these days. I think you want your name to be searchable, to be the most important demand generator. Should be kind of resonating in your name. But then there's a company called PickFU. It's not how it sounds, but you can spend relatively cheap dollars and you can target demographics that are specific for the region that you're looking for a park, and they'll conduct market surveys specifically to those purchasers. And we went through 4 different rounds to dial in our name. And the name that we would have landed on is nothing what the customer was telling us it should be. And where we ended up, we thought was kind of boring because it's similar to one of our other resorts, but it really, really resonated with the customer. And so we had to listen to the customer. And if we didn't do the research and didn't, go through that process, would we have failed because we had a bit? And of course not. But I think it's important to make sure that you have a brand that resonates. So, everybody knows what the Starbucks logo looks like, right? So you want to make sure that you start your brand off, your property off, with the right name before anything else happens. And don't just pick it out of the air. Make sure you have research and data behind it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say to keep with the name and logo and things like that, keeping your branding consistent across everything. You can do all the things in all the places, but if you have 3 different logos rolling around with different color schemes and that sort of thing, then you have no brand identity. People might know you exist, but it's not recognizable. Especially if you're a developer. There's a lot of larger development groups coming into the industry now. And I think something that we've been doing with CRR is every logo, there's a consistent theme in the appearance of every logo. Like they've chosen, there's kind of like 3 pillars of something, whether it's a tree or something that fits the landscape that it's in. And the font and text sizing and spacing and formatting is the same on all of the logos. And they have a tagline that they've created to go on every single one. So even though every property name is different and there's something different about each logo and their color scheme, there's still that continuity across it all. And so I think once you find what your brand is and just keeping it consistent on everything is really important so that you have that longevity of recognition.
Yeah, consistency is
a great point.
Whether you're developing a new park or you're purchasing one that's old. Like I know we have a client that we just started talking to that purchased the Jellystone and then immediately dropped the Jellystone, and then they're going to plan on changing the name of that park later in the fall. And so making sure that, yes, you can take your time on that branding, but when you're switching a name or changing it or reformatting who you're trying to attract or whatever it is, that you make sure that all of that is consistent across all your channels. And it takes time and it takes effort to change all that stuff, but you have to be there in the mind of the consumer and they have to know what you offer. All right, so we talked about, we've got marketing up to the point of opening, right? All right, so let's say we've developed our park, it's open, it's phase 1. How do we determine whether we're sticking with phase 2 or whether we're adjusting phase 2 or whether we're adding a phase 3, or what kind of goes into that process, Bob?
Well, I think that's always, I think it's a given. You have to go, because if you stop at phase 1, then you're going to have some money payback issues. You're going to have to continue to go through. For us, we were phased out. Originally, we wanted to build everything all at once, and luckily we didn't. That would probably run into more troubles than we could have handled. So doing the phases, you pick a certain amount that you can get done that winter, and then because you want to be open for summer, you don't want to be running in late into July trying to finish up sites. So it's just try not to pick off more than you can chew, but I think you're always going to be going through those phases eventually.
I think that's I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, as long as you have, because once you get going, then it's sort of cash flow. It's like, what do you need? When you need those sites, yeah, you're full, because you're always full July and August, and you're always full on the weekends. So it's sometimes it's hard to justify when you're only 60% full midweek, but the weekends are full. Do you need those extra sites? But yeah, you do, because eventually, the more sites you have, the more people will come. It's just a weird anomaly, but it happens. So you'll always have those percentages that hover the same, no matter how many sites you have. So
you're always full in July and August if you live in Canada.
That's true.
Okay, you're full December, January.
But I think that question is not. That is not an easy answer, because I think it's an ownership horizon question, right? Yep. What are the goals of the ownership? If it's a hold for 3 to 5 years, it's different than if it's a hold for 5 to 10. It's different if it's a legacy asset. It's different if it's in an opportunity zone. It's different if it's a refi, situation. Do they want to get their money back, or do they want to reinvest, or and so those things are always going to drive the answer to that question of what happens in phase 1 and phase 2. You mentioned cash flow, so some of that depends on cash flow, some of it depends on the capital, some of it depends on the sources of funding, equity. So it isn't an easy answer. I think it really depends on what the ownership profile is of each park. I think Coachella is a great example for us. We're definitely if you. Typically, ownership groups, Jeff, and I assume you're probably the same way, is when you're building a pro forma, you're looking at a cost per site as kind of your model, right? 20,000 a site, 30,000 a site, wherever you end up for your total budget. And I'm embarrassed to say our one of our properties right now is at about 105,000 a site. This one's with a huge lake amenity set, and Coachella was not that high, but it had started to escalate every time we started adding amenities. We wanted to do a massive food and beverage project. We wanted to do a big concert program with an amphitheater by the lakes. And so we did a Coachella Light, which is now only paltry $70,000 per site budget, and decided to do a phase 2, about 12 to 18 months post-opening, depending on, what ramp looks like. In essence, and how successful we are, with our ramp. But that's very different than the other one that we're doing, that we're spending it all up front. It's very similar ownership group, but just different profile. So I know that's a long answer to a not easy answerable question. Because it's an it depends.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at it from sort of a smaller ownership, and for us, because for us, your upfront costs are in the first phase, like all your infrastructure. Second phase, it actually just gets cheaper, but it's the same. So for us, we always had to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you have to just keep pacing forward. It's just like raising rates. You have to raise your rates. You have to keep going. If you stop, everything stops. So for me, that's why it was always just keep going. Yep. Maybe not as big as we wanted. Maybe phase 2 was smaller, but we're still just.
So Jeff, when you're out there consulting for these parks, like you said, mostly I'm assuming smaller mom and pops, like you were saying, when you're consulting and giving them the breadth and the huge amount of knowledge that you have, what's the one thing that you guys sometimes, or you will get stuck on with them, like you recommend to them and you kind of wish they would really adopt and listen to you on, but there's more pushback than you expected?
A lot of it's like, so renos, like existing parks, they don't, it's hard for them to justify the cost of doing a big reno or making some, deleting some sites so you can make some sites bigger. That a lot of people, we don't really get that sort of traffic. That's been a thing for years since I've been in the RV industry. Why would I build those sites? We don't get those size RVs. We don't get that clientele. And it's like, well, but you don't have them because you don't have those sites. That's why you don't have that clientele, and you'd be amazed at what is out there that you don't know. So there's that. Not much. Everybody's really ramping up with the industry. I think people are really excited with, like, new owners when they're buying old parks. They're excited. They see the potential in the RV industry, and they're getting really excited. So I'm not seeing a lot. I mean, it's just dollars and cents. It's like, yes, I know, Jeff, you're telling me I need to build these or do these cabins or stuff, but I just don't have the money. So, but as long as they're willing to work towards that, I think that's the key. Keep it in the back of your mind, in your back pocket, in the future plans. This is where you want to go. This is the direction. So anything you do now is heading in the direction of where you need to be later.
Yeah. How about you, Mike? If you're taking something to your ownership group or your partners, is there something that, like, obviously data, right? We've talked about that tremendously.
Yeah.
Discounting and detaching the data for a second. Is there something that you feel like you
I'll say with ownership, the answer is no. They have been supportive of everything we have done. I'll answer the question in terms of, what about the industry, right? What is the industry kind of stuck on? And what I have found is the revenue management component. We've always priced this way for years, right? So when we first came in, we were talking about seasonal pricing, right? And hey, we should have this price for first quarter and this price for second quarter. And maybe we price a little bit different for October. And we heard from multiple people, oh, the guests will never go for that. They're used to pricing once in October and then for the whole year. And we really combated that. And I think, if we look at our ramp from year 1 to year 2, certainly we've had an occupancy growth, but our ADR is up about 40-50%. Some of that is catching up from ramp, but some of that is really adjusting on the fly. So that was, I think, a lot of the pushback that we heard originally was, oh, you can't, rate, people are going to fight it. They won't stay with you, and you can't change it. The industry is very set in their ways. So I think that's what we heard quite a bit of time, and that depends on who you talk to, right? A lot of the influencers, which are more contemporary type travelers, who are much more up with the times, they're very flexible, nimble. There's a different word for you, Jeff, than pivot is nimble.
Nimble.
Sure.
As opposed to, again, Mom and Sally Joe, RV owner, park manager. I think it's just a different demographic that we run into of who we're approaching and dealing with. So that's, I think, that same thing of evolving the industry of the modern world. That's where we run into speed bumps and hurdles. And it sounds like Jeff, that's what he's trying to educate folks on as well. It's the same concept, just in a little bit different story. So I think as long as the industry can continue to evolve, and it sounds like it is, it just depends on different levels and perspective of where you are in your journey or your size of your property or your complexity. The industry is very healthy. It's exciting.
So
online
exciting.
Booking, I would say the online booking was always the toughest question. People are really seeing it, but the little parks, it's hard for them to justify. I don't need to do it. I've only got 30 sites, or 40 sites I can imagine. But when you get them to do that, and then they call you like at the end of the season, that was amazing. Or when they they start getting bookings in February and they're getting paid for it, and they're like, oh, this is great. I've never had that before. They've got a little cash flow in the spring. They're always amazed by that. But people are really onto that now too. That's not even much of a push.
You took the words out of my mouth, Jeff. I couldn't agree more. When I talk with campground owners, that's the biggest hurdle and barrier I've come across too. Is they don't want to list inventory. I feel like there's concern about this perception of losing control over, who's staying in their which sites in their park and things like that. But then also, charging fees and stuff like that. They're very resistant to that. I do shift. It's starting to transition, but so I look forward to the days where that's less of a hurdle. But
I mean, we're not wrong. I mean, Mike's not wrong either. You're not. People will grumble, and people don't like it, but they'll still come and they'll still pay, and that's the thing, right? They will, they will pay the lock fee. They might not like it because they've never had to do it before, but they will this year. And yeah, sure, everybody likes to grumble. That's what it's for.
Well, it comes with educating, right? We need to educate the consumer and make it easy for them. And now, it's interesting. We're finding that same transition now in the RV storage world. The online booking, and people don't want to show their inventory, and it's so antiquated. Like they have to call up, and of course they can't get anybody on the phone, and so it's now we're transitioning some of those things, into the RV storage world too, which is just it's such a parallel, which is just funny.
I think it's even more important for the small operators to have online booking. Like when you're a mom and pop and your phone's ringing at 9 o'clock, 11, are you going to answer it? No. Well, then you just probably lost a customer. So it gives you a break, because the weird thing is all our bookings came in the middle of the night, 11 o'clock at night, midnight. Like, why are these people sleeping? They're booking their campground.
Yeah, I think consumers, again, this shifting market demographic stuff. I know for me, like I'm happy to pay an online booking fee for the convenience. For maybe I typically have the conception that my credit card transaction is secure and those kinds of things. And I understand that I have to pay a fee to access those things. The level of convenience, the ability to access that in itself is going to cost me some money. So I think as our market demographics continue to shift, there will be less and less resistance from consumers to pay those fees.
I know a park that would charge $8 if you did it over the phone. He would charge you $8 booking fee if you did it manually over the phone, and he said it right on his website. Book here, or it's $8 extra.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Well, it's a ton of front desk staff time on the phone. It's a very expensive resource wise. I don't blame him one bit.
Well, but that's also as the demographic shifts, as we talked about too. You have those certain age group that just doesn't feel comfortable booking and is going to call the park and needs to talk to someone and has to walk through the size of the site and so find that one of the things that we did is we looked at the analytics of the call volume, because when I first joined the industry, like you cannot get through to anybody. Like we're trying to do price shops at all of our competitors and nobody were picking up their phone. And so we started looking at our call data, and there was one month that we had 3,000 calls and we did not answer 70% of those 3,000 calls. 70%. And so we said, we said, how much business are we losing? And then we calculated 30% lost reservation, and so we ended up hiring a reservationist who can pick up the phone, and our lost call volume went down to 40%. So we cut it in half, and I think that coincides with revenue increase. And so it's that same thing of how can we make the booking as easy for the customer, whether it's online or offline, I guess.
All right, well, we're running a little bit over here, everybody, but let's wrap it up with one thing here. Let's just kind of go around in one by one and just say, if we're talking to somebody who's developing an RV park, considering getting into the business, already has broken ground, whatever phase they're in, what's one thing that you would say to them that they should absolutely pay attention to, not forget, not skip over, not miss, not consider, whatever?
I would just say exactly what you just said. Get a plan, get a good plan, and stick to that plan. Really, and that doesn't mean closed-mindedness, but really just stick to that plan that you had. Try not to, don't cut the corners. Just do it right. Do it right the first time. Don't come back and fix it later, because it'll cost you more.
Yeah.
My answer would be call Jeff Kirkman.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say find a pro, find somebody who knows what they're doing, work with a consultant team. That stuff is going to be really valuable. Someone who's experienced in the industry, but also has knowledge about, your municipality code and requirements. A little bit of construction background doesn't hurt. some civil engineering background is probably really valuable. So yeah, find somebody who can help you, even if that's, you know, reaching out to your association for help to connect you.
Angela?
My answer was going to be identical to Jeff's, which is measure twice, cut once, right? Design it right up front. You know, get all your drawings, your architectural, your print, like do it all up front the correct way, get your plans correct, so that you know you go into it with the best foot forward.
Sorry, guys. I just echo kind of what everybody else has said. You know, making sure you have a plan in place, making sure that you have the right resources, whether that's, you know, what you're using to research or who you're talking to. And I think not being afraid to ask other like current owners if they own similar parks than you, whether they're in your area or not, and just asking them, you know, what some of their experiences have been in developing their park and running their park. Generally speaking, it's a pretty friendly industry. Even if someone that's down the road from you, a lot of times they're not afraid to, you know, share some tips and things like that. There's a special like level of camaraderie in the industry, I feel like, among most owners.
Yeah.
So
Totally agree. Yeah.
I think it's a good untapped resource for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would just say from my perspective, don't be afraid to spend. And that echoes a little bit about hiring consultants and experts and all those kinds of things, but from a marketing standpoint too. But understand that if you're willing to spend, then you also are able then to demand more of the people that you're spending with.
Yeah.
So have enough of a knowledge to say that, okay, if I'm going to give you the money that you're asking for because you're more expensive than other people, then I expect results, I expect reports, I expect data, I expect for you to prove that my money is actually working the way you say it's going to work.
Yeah, deliver.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Anything I missed, Cara? We need to cover? Or?
No, I think it was great. Always happy to chat with you guys. You're all wealths of information.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Angela. Cara, as always, we will see you next week.
Yeah.
Right.
Take care.
Bye.